Thousands of people have taken part in marches in Australia calling for better treatment of asylum seekers. Australia resettles almost 19,000 refugees a year, but the United Nations has criticised its hardline policies designed to deter those fleeing their own countries from looking for a new life in Australia. Andrew Thomas is at the march in Sydney.
There are protest rallies happening in towns and cities right across Australia on Sunday. But the one here, about 3,000 people so far in Sydney and in Melbourne, are likely to be the biggest. People here say that the refugees who've been sent by Australia to Manus Island in Papua New Guinea and to Nauru, many of whom have now been there for almost 5 years, have suffered enough and should be brought to Australia. They also think that Australia's refugee policies are tinged with racism. Earlier this week, Peter Dutton, the Immigration Minister, suggested that white South African farmers who are being kicked off their farms could perhaps be given refugee status here in Australia. This from a man who has spent his career, it seems to people here, keeping other refugees from other places out. This is what Nick Reamer from the Refugee Action Coalition said to me earlier.
I think the role of the demonstrations that we're seeing around the nation today is precisely to say Peter Dutton is not legitimate. He's not legitimate in saying that, white South Africans who haven't asked us for our help are more deserving of Australian asylum than the countless numbers of people fleeing war zones who have.
There are thousands of people here and thousands more in Melbourne and in other places across Australia, but in the great scheme of things, these are still relatively small protests. Australia's media rarely reports more than a tiny bit on these sorts of events. And in terms of politics, both the governing Liberal Party and the opposition Labour Party broadly agree on the tough policies, and that's why not much looks likely to change.